Okay, hello and welcome back. So today we're looking at cultural variations in attachment. So we're going to be looking and going back through the strange situation. It's the main method used here, but we're taking it into lots of different countries to see whether or not we have a universal attachment types, whether or not secure is the same in Germany, in Israel, in France, as it is in America and the UK. Okay, so it's culturally varied looking at attachment. We've got a couple of key research that we need to know. One is Van Isgendorn and Kroonenberg, a massive multi-study bit of research and meta-analysis. We need to evaluate it. Is it useful in telling us about attachment styles worldwide? And then I want you to have a go at applying some of your knowledge to an AO2 question, just to keep those fresh in your head, keep practicing them, keep quoting, and bringing in your knowledge so that we are still honing in on those exam skills as much as possible. So if you're in a pair, if anyone's at home, maybe you could talk to pets. How does attachment type change depending on where you are from? So do you think that your attachment type is going to be different to somebody who lives in Japan or in Germany? And why might you think, or why might that be? So I'll tell you. We have to look at attachment in two ways. So we have to look at collectivist cultures. So those that emphasise family, work goals, everybody working together. So interdependence and teamwork. So it's not the individual desires that are important here. It's the needs of the group, the needs of the whole that is more important. So our collectivist cultures, African tribes potentially would be looked at as a collectivist culture. Japan, China, where the parents live with children when they're older, so they're thinking about the whole, the family as the whole. Whereas an individualistic culture, so America, United Kingdom, it's personal independence and achievement, so being the best that you can be. So we're not thinking about the group or their goals, we're focusing on all for one and one for all, so the dog-eat-dog world. Sense of competition there. So how is that going to affect your attachment type? How is that going to affect your relationships, your friendships, how you work well in a team? So all of these things are important that we have to think about. So this is the first time that we're looking at cross-cultural ideas. So we're looking at other areas in the world and trying to create a universal. So Bowlby, one of our key attachment psychologists, attachment is innate in his eyes. It doesn't matter about background, nationality. It shouldn't affect your genetic tendency to form attachment. So he believes that everybody has it within us to create attachments with each other. Okay, so innate just means that it's there from birth. So it doesn't matter about anything else, we all can attach. A few studies have found very significant differences in patterns across cultures, but sometimes they might be due to research errors. So researchers in different cultures classify attachment differently and behaviours differently. So we have some minor variations. It's a really tricky thing to try and create a universal on something so complex like attachment type. They're all going to have different ways of looking at it. They're all going to judge it differently. So that inter-rater reliability, which we had quite strongly in the strange situation, isn't going to be common across a variety of different research, unfortunately. So cross-cultural research, what it's aimed to do is to look out if attachment varies between cultures. So is it significantly different between one culture and another? And usually the main method that is used is the strange situation. So Ainsworth, gotta love Ainsworth, the strange situation methodology is put into play here. But there's been a lot of arguments as to whether or not it's ethnocentric. So we spoke about this very briefly in the last PowerPoint. Ethnocentric just means it's biased to one culture. In this instance, the Western culture. So developed in America from a British researcher based on a British understanding of attachment. Using that method in lots of different cultures, how is that going to affect the results? Are we going to find consistency? So Van Isgendorn and Kroonenberg, I'm going to get you to make some notes. 5W, Van Isgendorn and Kroonenberg in a minute. But these are the results. So have a brief little look. So we've got secure, avoidant and resistant babies in their meta-analysis. So remember, a meta-analysis just means more. So lots and lots of research. Obviously, a problem with that is they're all going to have different aims. But a strength is that the sample size is massive. We have lots of studies here that are looking at attachment. Got a little bit of loose women on in the background there. Just going to shimmy that over. So we have 3 attachment types here, varying significantly across our countries. So what do you notice about the differences between them? So one striking thing that we can instantly deduce is that secure is the most common attachment type in these countries. So Great Britain, 75% secure, same in Sweden. China even, we've got 50% secure babies from this meta-analysis of lots of research. A significantly high proportion of insecure resistant in Israel, again a little bit in China and Japan, and then insecure avoidant, the highest being in Germany. We still have some in Britain and Sweden and the Netherlands, but not as much as Germany. Okay, so it's quite an interesting snapshot there of the research. So your job then is to create a flashcard, create a 5W, page 86 of the textbook of Van Isgendorn and Kroonenberg. What was the procedure? What were the findings? What was the aim of the research? That should take you 5-10 minutes. Pause it and come back. And then we will talk through this now. So, the study. There they are. It's Isgendorn, Kroonenberg. He reminds me of a character in The Simpsons, but I can't think of who right now. They are both Dutch. Little fact there for you. So, Van Isgendorn and Kroonenberg. The aim was to look at attachment types across a variety of different countries. We had 32 studies of attachment where the strange situation had been used to investigate our 3 attachment types. We've got 8 countries, 15 in the USA though, 15 bits of research in the USA. 1,990 children, and it was a meta-analysis. And we've got a wide variation. So I'll try not to pick out some of the evaluation as I go. We'll do it in a minute. I mean, this is interesting though. 15 bits of the research out of the 32 were from America. Is that really cross-cultural? Is that really going to be beneficial? Anyway, the findings, wide variation. So like we said, secure was the most common, varied from 75% to 50% in China. Insecure resistant, less common, and avoidance in Germany. Now, a type of question they could ask you on this, I'm trying to think what's come up for cross-cultural. There have been very specific questions asking in what country had the highest amount of insecure avoidance. Oh, so you've got to try and think of a way to remember the high variations for each, because that's quite a specific question that could come up. Conclusion then, what they found, so secure attachment most common, it supports Bowlby and the fact that it's innate, that we have this ability to form attachments regardless of anything else, but culture does impact on attachment. Now we're going to have a look at some of the specific evaluation here. So it is a large sample. The problem is we're comparing between countries, not actually looking at cultures. So like we said, 15 of them are from America. Does that give us much of an insight into culture? Surely it would be better to look at collectivist and individualist countries and do it that way. But other studies have come along and taken some of the negatives to make it better, to improve on it. So why these results? One of the most common things you need to do is to explain it. So if your question was asking you describe and evaluate research into cultural variations, you obviously need to talk about Van Isgendorn. That is a given. It's the most common study here. And you want to be unpicking those findings to really boost your marks. So why have we got such a high amount of secure in 18 studies in the US at 64%? Well, like we said, it's an individualistic country. So bringing in some of those ideas that we spoke about from the start. They encourage independence, being confident, exploration. You know, some people are in nurseries and daycare. So they're kind of, it's not a strange setting, but it is something a little bit different to the home setting that they're having to adapt to. We've got a high amount here of even in Japan, of secure attachment types. It's an individualistic culture again. They're rarely left from their mother, so the distress is probably more shock than anything else. So it makes it quite difficult to create any kind of comparisons from that. Oh, that should be over there actually. So avoidant then, the Germany study highlights a lot of avoidant behaviour, more than other countries. It's not surprising because if we think what we know stereotypically about Germany, if you go on holiday and the German tourists are very strict about what they want, they're very firm. Parenting is all about independence. They don't really want clingy infants. They try and make them as independent as possible. So we can see why they're actually quite used to being like, oh, whatever, see you later, bye, because that's just how they've been child reared, basically. What I need to do, actually. So there's two other bits of research before we go on to the evaluation. There's two other studies of cultural variations that you need to know as well on page 86. So the Italian study is Simonella. I always try and think of it as Salmonella. Looking at Italy and how it varied. And then you've got a Korean study. So Jin et al. Looking at different attachment types in Korea. These two bits of research and Van Isgendorn are your three really important bits of research that you want to know. So I would pause this here, go to page 86 and make notes on these. I'm not sure why they aren't on the PowerPoint. I will amend the PowerPoint so that those two bits of research are on there as well. But you go away and make the notes now, and then we'll come back and look at the evaluation. So, like we said, it's a meta-analysis. You've got a nice bit of however you can put in here. So Van Isgendorn, yes, meta-analysis, lots of different bits of research. How lovely, very large samples. So we're combining results of lots of different studies in different countries, which means that we've got loads and loads of people. So in our main Van Isgendorn, we've got 2,000 babies and their caregivers. That can give us some really good conclusions. The bigger the sample, the better the internal validity. But what you can instantly pick out as your counter argument is the fact that we are combining results. We've got loads of different aims. Not all of them are going to be following exactly what they wanted to look for. And that's a problem, because then we're not really sure what we're concluding. It makes those conclusions quite questionable. A bit like we said, we had so many of those 15 out of 32 of the countries, of the studies, were from the USA. So the meta-analysis claimed to study cultural variations, but actually the comparisons were between countries. So like we're comparing Germany and Japan, we're not actually looking at the culture of those countries, of those families. So it's a whole different process. If we looked at a tribe in Africa and compared that to somebody who lived in East London, we're going to find something totally different, which would be more interesting to look at. So we're kind of over-representing people in certain areas. So if we've got one sample who are, living in poverty, that's going to affect caregiving, that's going to affect attachment style. That might over-represent the sample. So it makes it quite biased, doesn't make it representative of culture. And then again, we want to hone in on the method that we're using here, the strange situation. And you've got some new key terms to bring into this section. So the strange situation developed in a Western country by a British researcher, aiming to use it in all these different countries, or use in all these different research in different countries to see if we can create a universal attachment type. But cross-cultural psychology includes two ideas, etic and emic. Imposed etic, imposed emic. And what they mean comes down to culture. So etic is the cultural universals. So that is the strange situation suffers from imposed etic. So it's where one culture, so Western culture, is imposing their ideas on different countries to assume that we have a universal, that we have something that we can see all around the world. Whereas an emic is where you're actually taking on board the fact that different cultures are different. So you're going into a country or a culture, learning about their way of life and then creating it from that. So you're not trying to use something already built to study a behaviour. You're using the behaviour to create your method of study, if that makes sense. So our strange situation suffers from imposed etic because it's based off of a British psychologist, a British method, a Western method, based on Bowlby, a tiny researcher in Britain. So it makes it quite difficult in terms of validity. So things like separation anxiety is a really good one here because we see it as a negative in some countries. So that's, they've got an insecure attachment. Clearly they're not coping very well. But in other countries, it's seen as a positive. So in Germany, it's not separation anxiety. It's actually just, what's a better way to describe it? It's not viewed as insecurity within that context. It's praised. So that's the problem with it. So last thing to do then is to look at an exam question. You can write this and send it to me, that's totally fine. Helga and Lars, this is in the book on page 86 at the bottom left, recently moved from Germany to England with their son Kurt. They take part in attachment research at their local university and hear that Kurt has insecure or avoidant attachment. Should Helga and Lars be concerned? Is this unusual? Okay, so you need to be, in this I'd refer to Van Liesendorf and Kronenberg and the proportions of German children of each attachment type in that study. Think about the fact where they are now. Is that going to be a problem? Is that something they should be worried about? So in terms of how this would be framed as a question, obviously the question would be different. It would probably be 6 marks. But for this, take about 5-6 minutes. Write your response, pause this, and then compare it to the model answer on the next page, which is this. So Helga's obviously concerned because she's been assessed as having a type A attachment, insecure avoidant. In Britain, the babies are classified as type A, 20-25%. It's seen as a bad thing. But in Germany, it's the most common attachment type. Bring in Vanish and Dawn, it showed that, actually insecure avoidant was more common than in Britain. They should be less worried because they're displaying attachment type that's more common for children with German parents. Something like that. So you're bringing in the study, you're bringing in Helga and Lars and Kurt, using some statistics. Bosh, lovely. Okay, that's cultural variations. So what you want to do now is either, because they do love this section of attachment because people forget the studies. So maybe make revision cards for the 3 bits of research, have a go at answering some of the other apply it methods questions. I would be doing a research methods question for every section we do. So this textbook is now your guide. So use those methods questions so that research methods are constantly being embedded. Remember, they're 30% of the A-level, so they need to be applied, they need to be practiced. And maybe do a little exam question or a plan for a 16 marker. Anything you do, you can send to me.